Welcome to a new edition of the Famous Interviews with Joe Dimino. On this episode, we talk with distinguished thought leader, renowned social psychologist, and musician, Dr. Andre Walton. He is a distinguished thought leader in the fields of creativity, innovation, and organizational design. His 20 years of groundbreaking creativity research has reshaped how organizations understand and harness creative potential, in particular regarding innovative environments and in the direction and resolution of burnout, anxiety, and stress. As the visiting professor of creativity and entrepreneurship at Newport Business School, Dr. Walton created executive development programs and delivered keynotes and workshops for globally recognized institutions like the Smithsonian, the Virgin Group, and so many others. He plays the jazz flute and uses creativity to thrive in everything he does. Enjoy this interview.
Dr. Andre, it's great to meet you. Thank you for taking a minute out for the show today.
Thank you very much indeed. Really appreciate it.
You bet. So let's begin our journey with this. 6 years ago, this pandemic was changing the world, changing all of us. How did you get through that era, and how has it changed the way that you do things today?
I think COVID had a very dramatic effect on me. I was lecturing at the local business school, and I in January of 2021, which was just around the time COVID was kind of really beginning to, people were in denial ahead of that, I think. And my healthcare team said, well, sadly, you've got cancer, and we're not real happy about you standing in front of groups of 50 kids several times a week at the university. I mean, these kids are not there for social distancing purposes. So I thought about it, and the university was very sluggish about changing, whether it was going to go virtual or whether it was going to be hybrid or whether they're just going to stick to the way it was. And so I quit. They said, you're, after what we've got to do to you, you're going to have a very, very poor immune system. So, just get out of it. So that's really when I took my coaching. I'd already been consulting coaching on the business world, and I sort of managed to. I took that a little bit more. Sort of that became my focus, and I became a certified accredited coach as well, and I started to build my speaking business. So. That was a major change for me, but it was by no means all negative. I was able to focus more on my music as well. I'm a professional jazz flute player. And so, there were a number of things in my life that could come to the surface. So there were definitely silver linings to that.
So let's dig into your work. You have a fascinating catalog of skills and what you're doing. So I'm going to put you in front of 13-year-olds at career day. One of the kids in the back of the room wants to know what you do on a daily basis for a living. How do you synthesize what you do to make it make sense to them?
Well, my life really has no elevator pitch. But my main focus is really everything to do with creativity. I've spent 25 years researching creativity. Creativity was the focus of my doctoral work, and I've developed a whole pattern of ways of thinking about creativity that are very, very different to how we intuitively think about it. And the kid at the back of the classroom is going to get a little bit bored if I just talk that. But very briefly, the notion is this: you ask people, "What's your idea of creativity?" If I say creativity, what does it mean to you? And I get all sorts of different answers. I get the products of creativity. People start talking about, well, I mean, the iPhone and jet engine, and and other people just really consider it in a rather more trivial way. It might be something that Aunt Dottie did when she gave up her teaching job and bought a paint box. And so creative thinking, though, is a core human value. Since we're in the bow and arrow and the wheel, it is the driver for our social evolution. I mean, we don't have the jet engine in the iPhone just because we've got opposable thumbs. We have them because we have this core human drive. And every core human drive, if you deprive somebody of that, it can have serious significances. You know, if you solitary confinement, for instance, depriving people of that ability to mix with each other, to connect with people. And so, you know, these are important things. And I believe that in the world, the high tech kind of very complex world that we've created, we have driven ourselves to be thinking about things analytically and deductively. You know, we talk about drilling down and focusing in, and that's just the opposite to creative thinking. You know, if you want to see how creative thinking works, just really take a close look at your kids or your grandkids, you know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years old. And they don't have the ability to think as we do as adults. They don't, because as adults, if we come across a new situation, we tend to say, when have I experienced this before? And then our brain scurries off to its little file cabinets, finds out what we did at that time, and that's the template for what we do now. And it saves us an enormous amount of time and energy. You know, if you to think about things in a very analytical way, we use as much energy as going for a stroll, believe it or not. And so, you know, we don't, as kids, we don't have that ability. We've got no history. We've got no template. We've got nothing to work with. So we have to think creatively. And, you know, if my grandkids, I mean, they pick up every day, they used to pick up something new, and it's, you know, suddenly my mouse would become a cell phone, and, you know, the vegetable strainer would be an ancient warlord's battle helmet. I mean, they just had to use all these new little pieces of experience to start making sense of their world. I mean, they're on a fast track to becoming, you know, adults that have to master this incredible complexity. So, you know, it's natural for people to have this basis of creative thinking because everybody once had it, but we've lost it. You know, as adults now, we've lost it. We very seldom do we really look at things in a creative thinking kind of way. And that imbalance, I believe, is the source of our anxiety, is the source of burnout, is the source of stress. And it's also the source of one reason why we're increasingly alienating ourselves from other people. And however much, you know, my students will tell me, you know, oh, I've got lots of friends. I've got 2,700 friends on Facebook. You know, the reality is that that's not a substitute for one-on-one conversation. That's not a substitute for getting together with your buddies and, you know, doing some hoops or going for a beer or having a chat or whatever. I mean, you know, and it's pretty straightforward stuff. I mean, you know, when we're having a conversation, only 30% of the information that we transfer from one to the other is actually the words. The rest of it is the way we say them and all the aspects of body language. And so it's not really surprising that what we now try and substitute for real connection with others is a pretty poor substitute.
So let's get into what you wanted to be when you were a kid. When you were that age and you were at school at Career Day, what was your dream gig?
I didn't have a very well-defined dream. I know it was to do with creativity because my dad was becoming a world-renowned artist. My mother was very, very creative. I've always been with creative people. My first job out of school was as a graphic designer for a magazine, you know, publishing company. That's despite having all like sciences in my high school, so that was a little interesting. But it's just really to be creative and to innovate. And in my 20s, I took two of my crazy ideas to become global leaders in their field. My microphone was the microphone of choice for Frank Sinatra and Elton John and, you know, Moody Blues and dozens of people. And then my other invention was a system which has made ultrasound imaging a safer procedure for pregnant women. And so innovation is just something that I've just always had to do. And to this day, I cannot do something in a prescribed way, you know. I mean, you're there with the instructions as to how to assemble this horrible box of rubbish, and I can't do that. I mean, I just, I have to try and do everything, my way first, and then if that doesn't work, then I have to find some other way of doing it. So that's just who I am, whether I like it or not.
So, is it safe to say that the creativity has always been in your bloodstream based on your parents and what you saw, and this was going to be the course you were going to take in life?
Yeah, I mean, I think sort of maybe 30 years ago, it was pretty clear there are three strands to my DNA, and one of them is creativity. The second one is entrepreneurship and business, which I've always found fascinating. And the third is teaching, mentoring, coaching.
So, let me ask you this. Who has been that inspirational force for you that's allowed you to navigate your life and define where you belong, define what makes you happy, to make a change and to affect people? Who has been that for you?
Interestingly, I think it's the lack of a person which has achieved that for me. Um, my mother was a cook housekeeper in a very busy house in 1950s England. And so we always lived in somebody else's house, and she was always incredibly busy. So the day before we had dishwashers and washing machines and all these kinds of things. And so she didn't have a lot of time to be, you know, looking after what I was doing during the day. And as long as there weren't any noises or sounds of things being broken, I was pretty much left to my own devices. And that was really true all my life as a child. And so one of the great benefits of that was I didn't have anybody saying, "Oh, you can't do that. That's going to be no, no, no. Don't go no. You're not going to down to the river on your own." There was none of that. And so, really, when I started to become an adult, I felt that I could do absolutely anything because nobody had ever said I couldn't. And so that was a very, very powerful kind of message for me. And in my business world, when I left England to come to the States to start a subsidiary for both those businesses, my bank manager, my financial advisor, I mean, they were like, Andre, you can't do that. You haven't got the resources to do that. I mean, this is not the time you should be doing that. And how wrong they were. I mean, that whole process, quadrupled the size of my company in 18 months. And so, yes, it had its potential dangers, but, they weren't, it wasn't the easiest thing in the world to do with a limited budget and various other things, but so what, so, that kind of feeling that there really aren't any boundaries unless you choose to put them there was the message that I was left with from all that experience, and one that I really value all my life.
So what about music? Talk to me about jazz. What got you in that world? Who were inspirations?
Um, I've always been. I started to play piano when I was like four, and picked up the guitar when I was, like 11-ish. And when I started to realize, when I was about 20, I hitchhiked to Greece from England. And one of the things I realized was that I was not going to be sort of one of these hippies with a guitar strapped to their backpack. Mainly because, somebody driving along the road seeing not just the hippie, but the backpack and the guitar and all that stuff when they've already got a half full car, it wasn't necessarily. So I picked up the flute and I started to play the flute. And one of the things, then I started to take it seriously and studied it at the university. When I was doing my PhD, I had excess credits left over from the work I was doing for the university, and I used those on jazz improvisation, and so forth. And one of the reasons I just really love jazz is it is a fabulous analogy for creative thinking, because we both need logical, deductive stuff, and we need creative thinking. And so, when you're starting off your melody, and everybody's there, we have to play the right notes at the right time. This is all about being in concert together. And that's your deductive, analytical kind of brain saying, I've got to do this. And then that magic moment comes when you're going to improvise. And that's when your creative brain takes over and you get into the flow. And I have just a wonderful piano player. This was in Portugal. We had a trio. We used to play to audiences of 2,000 plus people. And he was a fabulous piano player, and we just really gelled. And it was just when people talk about sort of being in the flow, that's when it really came up. But this wonderful way of being able to sort of switch from your creative improv to back to and from this very this structure that we all need in some parts of the music. It was a great analogy for the whole process of creative thinking for me.
So, what was the first live concert that you saw that blew you away?
Um, well, when I was at school, I goofed off from my chemistry class with the help of the chemistry tech. He and I used to get on pretty well, and pop into the back room and have the occasional smoke when things are going a little drearily in the classroom setting. And so I goofed off to see a couple of concerts at a place called Fairfield Halls, which was a brand new and spectacular place to hear music. And these were lunchtime concerts. And one of them was Dire Straits. And that was just, and the other one was, it's escaped me. The Dire Straits concert was incredible. I mean, it was just a very, odd setting. I mean, it was, but lunchtime on a like Thursday. It was not, and they weren't that well known at that time, but it was just amazing. I mean, they were great musicians, and it was a very interesting phenomenon. That was, a major kind of thing that told me I needed to be a part of that world.
Yeah, yeah. So let me ask you this. What is it that gets you up every day to do the work that you do, to change lives, to take care of your own soul, that collective energy to be a human every day? What gets you out of bed? What happens when the alarm clock goes off?
Um, well, thankfully, I managed to wake up without an alarm clock, so
Okay.
that's a very nice experience anyway.
Yeah.
But after my early morning meditation, the thing that really energizes me is that almost every day something happens that indicates to me that my message is making an impact. The focus of my creativity at the moment is to help people with burnout, anxiety, and stress. A lot of people don't realize that a lot of people with burnout end up in suicide. I mean, burnout in its symptoms can be as serious as PTSD. People don't always realize that because it's kind of thrown away. It's a word that's, lost a lot of value. And so my creative thinking process really helps rebalance the mind, and it helps those people with burnout and anxiety. And every day something comes along that kind of suggests to me that my message is taking one step further forward. And I just recently launched the Burnout Foundation to help get the message, not just my message, but all valuable messages across to people with burnout and anxiety. And so that's really energizing for me.
So let me ask you this. If you had a dream tonight and you ran into the 18-year-old version of you, and you walked into the room and there was a film projector and you clicked play and it was a highlight reel, say a minute or two long of your life that you've lived, would that young version of you believe that your life turned out this way?
Um, Probably not.
Yeah.
Probably not. I don't think it would be too much of a stretch. I mean, I had a mother that was convinced I should be some kind of, if you morph sort of Dr. Schweitzer, the amazing person who did wondrous work in South Africa with, Ashkenazi, or I mean, a well-known sort of musician. So her view of what I was supposed to be was a sort of combination of these two kind of ideas, and so to some extent, I suppose she always expected me to be doing something worthwhile. So I don't think it would be too much of a stretch, but I certainly think it would be a bit of a shock when that video started to play.
Yeah. So, when you look back on your life, you've done so many things. You have a level of fearlessness in you, an adventure. What is the biggest risk that you've taken professionally?
Um, I think professionally, moving to the US to start my American company. I was in my mid 20s, no, late 20s, and it was a big thing. Partly because I mean I was still running the company in England, so there was a lot of time and energy spent going from one place to the other. And that was a loss of control. I mean, I trusted the people I'd trained up there to do what they were doing and to keep me informed and all that sort of thing. So, that fear didn't last for a very long time, but just letting go of your sort of, organizational baby, was a challenge.
So let me ask you this. Of everything that you've done and accomplished and evolved to at this point, what are you ultimately the happiest about, the proudest of?
Sorry, say that again, the last bit.
Of everything that you've accomplished and achieved and overcome, what are you the proudest of?
Um, I a long time ago, for some reason or other, I don't remember why, I thought that, well, firstly, I think we have a very strange concept of death in this part of the world. And I always felt that as I was reaching the end of my life, the very worst thing that could possibly happen would be that I would look back on my life and say, what the hell did you do? I mean, that to me was sort of a fear. I mean, just how awful that would be. And so I think that's something that's kind of driven, the vast array of things that I've tinkered with, you know. But I think the whole, and it's also sort of created a lifetime of desire to learn things. I think that, is another part of that process. I think learning things is fun
Yeah.
and very rewarding. That when I see my grandkids, they're actually thankfully good examples of this. They like doing things and figuring out when something doesn't work. They like to figure out doing how they do some other things. And I'm very pleased about that, because sometimes when I see kids or younger people, that have a challenge and they find somewhere sort of slipping around the edge of it rather than addressing it. And sort of rather than fixing this challenge, it's like sort of, well, okay, I'll just buy another one, or something like that. And I sort of feel a little bit sad because it's like you're never going to have that incredibly satisfying feeling when you've achieved that little goal, And then I get all introspective and think, well, perhaps that's twisted. I mean, why is life just about achieving things? So, there's a whole kind of philosophical confusion that goes on in my brain at that point. But
Yeah.
I mean, basically, I think I don't care about sort of, leaving a legacy of Andre when I'm gone. But what I do care about is trying to use knowledge and ideas that I've gained to actually help people.
So let's get to the heart and soul of who you are. At the end of the day, everyone has a perception of you. Family, friends, clients, colleagues, fans of your music, everyone that knows you, but you run the show. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
I think it's a very interesting question, and there's a whole range of bits and pieces there. I mean, I'm still working on my stuff from my childhood, right? So that's a part of who I am. I can't help but be an innovator, and so I think that's an important part of me too. I think although I was actually pretty successful as an entrepreneur, I was not well suited to that. I found myself getting very stressed about things that other entrepreneurs would kind of shrug at. So I think it's really my goal now is to help people, but also to be happy. To be really happy and content, and try and be in a moderately stress-free kind of place. That comes from the cancer, really. Just being well aware that I want to kind of provide myself a good environment where I can live a healthy life, and just really enjoy my my granddaughters and my family.
So if anybody wants to reach out, they want to see you speak, they want to hire you, they want to get your music, any and all of the good business, where do they go?
If they go to hire Dr. Andre, hire HIREDRANDRE.com, they can then hit a link to get to my coaching website, or they can see videos about bits of my life or my TEDx talk or various other things. So that will get them there. And there's another button they can just press to make an appointment to have a free half-hour chat with me.
Wonderful. I will put all of these links in the show notes. What a joy. What an honor. It's great to meet you. Thank you for your story. Thank you for what you're doing, and best of luck with everything.
Thank you so much, Joe. It's been wonderful to talk to you too.
Thanks for tuning in to another famous interview with Joe Dimino, where we cover the world of art, literature, business, spirituality, music, and more from around the globe. Our esteemed theme music was composed and produced by the great E.E. Pointer of Kansas City's River Cow Orchestra. If you want to hear more interviews, visit the Famous Interviews with Joe Dimino channel on YouTube. You can also find us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Thanks again for listening, and until next time.